Hello, this is Dr. Gary Castleberry, Associate Professor of Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University. I'm here to provide a bit of context for our COM 2113 Media Culture and Social Influence Week 2 assignment. Now, we do have multiple assignments each week in the class, but I am going to zero in on the assignment that is tentatively titled A Cultural Study Based on the James Bond franchise. That's right, we are going to make use on that promise that we were using genre and popular culture to better understand communication, mass comm, theories and methods throughout this course. And so this will be an excellent opportunity to connect the dots a little bit, but I wanted to talk to you all about that assignment. It's an assignment that, for whatever reason, sometimes trips people up. So let's add some context to better appreciate the values that this exercise offers us. Let me move some distracting pop-up ads out of the way here. But let's talk about what it is and what our goals are and why that matters and why it's important. First of all, this continues our through line of using the spy genre as a learning tool to understand how communication moves people and moves through people, as some scholars would say. What this assignment does, in essence, is we're tasked with checking out the Everything or Nothing BBC documentary on James Bond. This was filmed around, I believe, the 50th anniversary of the character or something like that. And so it was produced for that well-known channel. It's a global channel now, BBC. But it's incredibly well made, and it's somewhat rose-colored in its perception of the characters, the people that makes them. But it tells a very fascinating story. This is a pretty good documentary, and you'll find it quite effective. Now, because of the nature of this spy series, it's something that reaches back to the 1960s, right? 1960s to the 2000 teens or late 2000s, and for that reason, some of the history of the character a little bit problematic by today's standards. All right, this quote unquote super spy that has garnished such an iconic reputation has some gray areas, if not some dark ones, a speckled past, if you will. And that's different from, say, contemporary fictional icons like, I don't know, Harry Potter. Although, if you all will recall, when those books were first coming out, long before the movies, they were brewed in controversies of their own, especially in conservative or religious circles. So this is an interesting takeaway, that popular culture is, marked in different ways. It has different meanings for different people, and that's why it not only creates different use values for us, for audiences, for consumers, for people, but it can create opportunities for maybe misinterpretations. In week 2, we will read about Stuart Hall's encoding-decoding method of understanding the communication process. And a key innovation that he adds to that is what he theorizes is, he calls it a dominant hegemonic encoded meaning, right? So the preferred meaning that most people understand. Then there's what's considered the negotiated meaning of a given message. And that's where we sort of understand elements of its intent, but we also maybe infuse our own biases. And then there's the oppositional reception of a message. This is where we reject it outright. And so I want to recognize there that, whether it's a Harry Potter, whether it's, I don't know, the something like professional sports leagues and maybe in a post hyperbolic political period in America, or something like 007, James Bond. There will always be these points of resistance in culture versus points of acceptance. And so the week 2 exercise tasks us with considering some of these qualities. And this documentary is great because you don't have to be familiar with the character or do this enormous deep dive to be able to appreciate its evolution over time, all right? And so the Everything or Nothing documentary is going to give you that purview of of a wider look at the history of the character, the franchise, the people involved. Now, caveat is sometimes we can get mixed messages and think, oh, okay, that's perfectly harmless, tame material, and then just dive right in. But it's probably a great opportunity to note, while these aren't hideously dark films, they probably have a little bit of an older age range that they cater to, and especially maybe some of the older ones, even though maybe they're less violent than today's standards, they might have some other themes that come up that would be a little more taboo than what we're accustomed to kind of maybe watching with wider groups of people. So that is something to consider. Take apart even using this assessment tool. So the goal in the week 2 assignment, the cultural comparison, we're basically practicing without writing essays. We're trying to break away from that habit for just a little bit. There's plenty of writing in this class. We're using the tenets, the wide lenses of cultural studies to execute this assignment. And so in cultural studies, which is a very interdisciplinary area of inquiry in a scholarly sense, but that is to say it's used by various departments in different elements of the humanities. But cultural studies often is looking at some important themes, right? And these themes might be assessed or analyzed or critiqued or deconstructed in, we'll say, like a scholarly context. And these themes, the tentpole themes in cultural studies tend to be issues of race, issues of class, issues of sexuality, and issues of power. And while there is room for extension always in these fields, these kind of cornerstones of critique and assessment that people use when applying a cultural studies type lens to something. So we're asking you to create some categories based on those big item words or terms, and then assess using your data collection is just checking out that documentary. I think it's about maybe a 90-minute documentary. And while bootleg versions of it used to be available in places on the internet, shall not name names, it's definitely available to rent on YouTube, and we provide a hyperlink to that. It's not going to cost any more than if you rented a video to pacify a little bit of time in the household. But so some of the quotations from those older texts, they might be a little un-PC, so be conscientious of that, depending on who's coming into the room to watch with you, or what that means. We're not putting anyone in a negative type of space for consuming this. Rather, these are cultural artifacts that have left a mark. They've left like deep impressions in society for long periods of time, and the result is it's generated billions and billions of dollars, and that's not the be-all, end-all of anything, but in 21st century terms, that means a lot, right? And so it speaks to its cultural currency, not just its economic currency. But it's not without some lingering effects. So just this week, we have yet another instance where the pandemic delayed the 5th and final outing of the James Bond franchise for leading man Daniel Craig, No Time to Die. It was set to begin in April of 2020, and that was when the pandemic came on, kind of swept globally, and it was delayed. It was delayed again. It was delayed into 2021. It was delayed from 2021 from one date. Anyway, long story short, it is landed in October of 2021. For all intents and purposes, it is coming out. It's going to release in what we're calling a final date. And because of that, you'll notice all the press clippings, the headlines generated about this topic. and very interesting how it is approaching conversations with regards to how it's portrayed women in the past versus how it's trying to portray females in the Daniel Craig era and moving forward, right? They're very cognizant of a need to move beyond one-dimensional, perhaps stereotypical, if not, kind of hypersexualized characters and problematic storytelling formats like that used to kind of, it belonged to a certain time. It's very reflective of a type of idealized fantasy in the era in which the books were written, right? So primarily the swinging 60s, if you know what I'm saying, in Western culture. And culture changes, and I think in this instance, these are remarkable changes that we can appreciate, and that's part of why this exercise remains relevant in this class. So hopefully you're hanging on with this. But even the most recent press clippings out there, I'm calling them that as if anything's in print anymore. But the director's been doing interviews with major outlets and is outright talking about, kind of indicting the character behaviors in the past, like in its earliest iterations. And that says something. That's pretty bold. And in fact, this is the first. I could be absolutely wrong, but it's the first American or kind of non-UK born director helming this franchise, and Cary Fukunaga, and he's being given that agency with which to critique the character. It's a very fascinating move. Likewise, you all will be able to critique this character, this franchise, etc., and the decisions they make, not only in this week 2 documentary assessment assignment, but we're going to continue this thread into the midterm next week. So it's a great primer to get you thinking about this film franchise. And again, not as a point of we're just exalting it in full glorification. It's a learning tool. It's a way in which we can look at a designated artifact from the past and assess it compared by our standards of today. And that is something. Like, that is an effective and practical assignment for us to complete. And so we can think about week 2 as being the first element of that. Week 3, we'll have another element in that. And timing is everything. In week 5, you will get to choose your own film to perform a review for, and that's already been established in the syllabi and video syllabus. But you could potentially, you could review one of the latest entries. I don't know. Find a spy vehicle for that media criticism that you're going to be working on. But that's another assignment for another time. In this instance, I hope you appreciated hearing more about that assignment. My goal is to give us a fuller context, because sometimes it's that context that's missing, and that's where students run up against misunderstanding the rules or misunderstanding what we want. We're looking at creating some subcategories, using some specific terminology, and making some lists, right? And critiquing artifacts. Well, the remainder of the assignment descriptions you will find, as always, on D2L, and I wish you best of luck on this latest mission in COM 2113, Media Culture and Social Influence.